There is a particular shade of golden hour light that used to fill our home, a warm, honeyed glow that caught the dust motes dancing in the air and made everything seem soft, safe, and eternal. For 15 years, I believed in that light. I believed it was a reflection of our life, of the love and stability I had built with David. I was Isabella Croft, and my world was a perfectly curated diorama of success and marital bliss. I was the former marketing prodigy who had gracefully stepped back to become the architect of our domestic paradise, while David, my brilliant, ambitious husband, conquered the corporate world as a rising star at Titan Global. We were a team, or so I had believed with every fiber of my being. The first crack in the foundation was not a loud, splintering sound, but a slow, silent seep of cold air. It began about 8 months ago, after David secured his promotion to Senior Vice President of Finance. The victory celebration was lavish, held at a rooftop bar overlooking the city he was determined to own. He was radiant, buoyant, the center of a universe of backslaps and admiring glances. That night, wrapped in the crisp night air and the scent of his expensive whiskey, he looked at me, his eyes shining with a strange, new intensity. "We've made it, Bella," he'd whispered, his hand squeezing mine. "This is just the beginning. Everything is about to change for us." I had smiled, my heart swelling with pride, naively believing his us included me. The change, when it came, was insidious. The late nights at the office, once a sporadic occurrence, became the relentless norm. "The merger, Isabella. The due diligence is a nightmare. You have no idea the pressure I'm under." The phrase, "you have no idea," became a mantra, a wall he built between us, brick by condescending brick. He was pulling away, retreating into a world of spreadsheets and conference calls where I was not welcome. The physical distance was palpable. His side of the bed was often cold by the time I woke, and the easy, familiar intimacy we had shared for a decade and a half was replaced by a stiff, perfunctory peck on the cheek. He began to scrutinize my life, the life he had encouraged me to build, the charitable board I sat on. "A vanity project, Bella. We need to be more discreet with our profile." "The art classes I took. A frivolous expense. We need to be mindful." My weekly lunches with my sister, my one tether to the person I was before I became Mrs. Croft. "Do you have to see her so often? Her negativity is a drain." He was systematically isolating me, cutting the cords that connected me to anything outside of the gilded cage he was constructing. The most chilling transformation was his relationship with his phone. It became a physical extension of his body, a black slab of secrets he guarded with a paranoia that felt both alien and terrifying. He took calls in the garden, his voice a low, urgent murmur I could never quite decipher. He started using a passcode I didn't know, his thumbs swiftly shielding the screen whenever I entered a room. One evening, I brought him a cup of tea in his home office, the inner sanctum I was now tacitly forbidden from entering. He was so engrossed in a string of encrypted messages that he didn't hear me approach. On the screen, I caught a fleeting glimpse of a name before he slammed the laptop shut. Seraphina. A name that sounded like a poison-tipped dart. When he looked up, his face was a mask of such cold fury that I took a step back, the teacup rattling in its saucer. "Don't you ever sneak up on me like that," he hissed, the venom in his voice so unlike the man I had married. I became a ghost in my own home, tiptoeing around the edges of his simmering resentment. I made excuses for him to my concerned friends, to my worried sister. "He's under stress. It's a difficult time. He'll come back to me." I was an expert in denial, a master of painting over the rot with a bright, cheerful veneer. The heart always knows the truth first. Mine was a clenched fist of dread in my chest, a constant, aching premonition of the storm I refused to see coming. The storm broke on a perfectly ordinary Tuesday. The sky was a faultless, cloudless blue. I had just returned from a morning run, my endorphins providing a temporary buffer against the constant low-grade anxiety that had become my new normal. I was stretching on the porch when a black sedan, sleek and anonymous, pulled into our driveway. 2 men emerged, their suits as bland and serious as their expressions. They moved with an unnerving, synchronized purpose. "Mrs. Isabella Croft?" the taller one asked, flashing a badge that made my blood run cold. "FBI. We have a warrant to search the premises." The world seemed to slow, the colors leaching from the perfect green of our manicured lawn. "What is this about?" My voice was a thin, reedy thing I barely recognized. Embezzlement. $4.3 million from Titan Global's client escrow accounts. Funds that were funneled through a series of shell corporations and into offshore accounts. The numbers were so vast they were meaningless. All I could process was the accusation. That's impossible. There must be a mistake. My protest sounded feeble, pathetic. They moved past me with a chilling efficiency, their gloved hands beginning the methodical dismantling of my life. They didn't ransack, they surgically targeted. They went straight to David's office, but with an even more focused intensity, they descended upon my spaces. My laptop from the sunroom, my personal filing cabinet, the small cherrywood desk where I managed our household accounts. It was in a folder labeled Tax Documents 2023, nestled between charitable donation receipts and property tax records, that they found the digital skeleton key to my destruction. A single, unassuming text file. It contained a list of offshore bank account numbers in the Cayman Islands, precise routing instructions, and a timeline of transactions that perfectly mirrored the stolen funds. The final, masterstroke of the frame was a line of text at the bottom. Transfer complete, awaiting your signal for Phase 2. The initial, sheer, brain-freezing confusion lasted only a heartbeat. Then, the pieces, the late nights, the secretive calls, the financial scrutiny, the name Seraphina, slammed together with the force of a physical blow. The I was me. He hadn't just been planning an affair, he had been building a prison for me. I was his exit strategy, his patsy, the perfect, unsuspecting wife who would take the fall while he vanished with the money and his new life. David arrived home in the midst of the chaos, his timing impeccably theatrical. His performance was a masterpiece of feigned shock and devastation. "Isabella!" he gasped, his face a canvas of bewildered horror. He looked from the agents to me, his eyes wide with a betrayal so convincing I almost believed it myself. "My God. What have you done? I knew you were unhappy, restless. But this, how could you?" I was read my rights, my hands cuffed behind my back. The cold metal was a brand of ultimate humiliation. As I was led out of my home, past the staring neighbors, I caught one last glimpse of David's face. In that unguarded sliver of a second before the mask of the grieving, betrayed husband snapped back into place, I saw it. Not shock, not sadness. A flash of pure, unadulterated triumph. The holding cell was a brutalist nightmare of concrete and steel, stinking of despair and industrial-grade cleaner. I sat on the cold bench, the reality of my situation settling into my bones. He hadn't just left me, he had annihilated me. He had crafted a narrative of my guilt with the precision of a master storyteller, and I was now trapped inside his plot. But as I sat there in the deafening silence, the initial shock began to crystallize into something else, something hard and sharp and dangerously focused. A cold, clarifying rage. He had framed me, believing Isabella Croft was just a decorative, helpless accessory. He had forgotten the woman I was before I took his name. He had forgotten Isabella Izzy Vance, the marketing strategist who had once been feared for her brilliant, ruthless campaigns. I understood how to build a narrative. More importantly, I understood how to dismantle one. He had built a perfect frame, and I was going to ensure that when it shattered, the glass would cut him to ribbons. The game was on, and he had just made the fatal error of underestimating his opponent. The first 48 hours in custody were a descent into a special kind of hell, a curated nightmare of processed air, buzzing fluorescent lights, and the constant, low-grade terror of the unknown. I was processed, fingerprinted, and photographed, my mugshot capturing a hollow-eyed ghost with my own face. I was assigned a public defender, a young, overworked man named Ben whose eyes glazed over when I tried to explain the complexity of the frame-up. He saw a wealthy, bored housewife, a cliché, and he was already mentally preparing a plea bargain. I was alone, utterly and completely. But in that absolute isolation, the cold fire of my rage became my only companion, a core of molten steel solidifying in my chest. The arraignment was a circus. The press, tipped off by an anonymous source, no doubt David himself, lined the halls, their cameras flashing like malevolent lightning. I stood before the judge in a cheap, ill-fitting suit provided by the state, my hands cuffed, while the prosecutor laid out the state's airtight case. He spoke of my extravagant lifestyle, my secret resentment of my husband's success, and the meticulous digital paper trail that led directly to me. David sat in the front row, the picture of devastated dignity, his shoulders slumped, occasionally dabbing at his eyes with a handkerchief. Our eyes met once. I didn't flinch. I let him see the ice in my gaze, the complete absence of the broken woman he expected. For a fraction of a second, his performative grief faltered, and I saw a flicker of confusion. It was the first tiny victory. Bail was set at an astronomical sum, one designed to keep me exactly where I was. I was remanded back to custody, but not before my sister, Clara, fought her way through the crowd. Her face was pale, her eyes red-raw, but they burned with a ferocious belief. "I know you, Izzy," she whispered, clutching my arm through the uniformed officer escorting me. "This is not you. We will fight this." She pressed a small, folded piece of paper into my hand before I was led away. Back in my cell, I unfolded it. It was a phone number for a retired FBI agent turned private investigator, a man named Marcus Thorne, with a reputation for being brilliant, expensive, and utterly unscrupulous when it came to uncovering the truth. Clara had already spoken to him. He was willing to meet. Hope, a dangerous and fragile thing, began to bloom in the sterile darkness. My salvation came from an unexpected quarter. My court-appointed lawyer, Ben, while initially dismissive, was a good man at his core. He saw my unwavering defiance, my sharp, analytical questions about the evidence, and the complete lack of any financial motive in my past. During a private meeting, I looked him dead in the eye and laid my cards on the table. "Ben, David did this. He's framing me. I don't have the money to pay you, but I can give you something better, the truth. Help me, and I promise you, this will be the case that makes your career." Something in my conviction, the sheer force of my will, got through to him. He agreed to facilitate a visit from Marcus Thorne, posing as my mitigation specialist. Marcus Thorne was a man in his late 50s, with the weary eyes of someone who had seen every permutation of human deceit. He didn't offer platitudes. He sat across from me in the stark visitation room and said, "Tell me everything, not what you think I want to hear. Every detail, no matter how small." And I did. I talked for 2 hours. I told him about the change in David, the name Seraphina, the financial control, the encrypted messages, the way the FBI agents had beelined for my personal documents with unnerving precision. I described the look of triumph on David's face. Marcus listened, never interrupting, his fingers steepled under his chin. When I finished, he was silent for a long moment. "It's a good frame," he said finally. "Almost perfect. He's covered his tracks digitally. The money trail is a labyrinth and it all points to you. To break this, we can't just prove you're innocent. We have to prove he is guilty. We need to find the real money and we need to find Seraphina." He laid out a 3-phase plan. Phase 1, the bait. While I was in here, I had to play the part of the broken, defeated wife. I had to write David letters, pleading, desperate letters, begging for his help, professing my confusion, playing into his ego. We needed him to feel secure, to let his guard down. Phase 2, the dig. Marcus would use his contacts to trace the offshore accounts beyond the obvious trail David had left. He would also look into David's recent travel, his communications, anything to find Seraphina. Phase 3, the trap. This was my domain. Once we had enough, we would spring a trap of our own, one that would force David to make a fatal mistake. The letters were the most difficult thing I have ever done. Pouring that false vulnerability onto the page, appealing to the man who had destroyed me, felt like swallowing shards of glass. I wrote of my love, my despair, my bewilderment. "I don't understand any of this, David. My mind is a fog. I need you. However this happened, we can fix it together. You've always been the strong one." I sent them through Ben, who ensured they were not monitored by the prosecution. Weeks turned into a month. The legal process ground on with glacial slowness. Then Marcus visited with his first breakthrough. "The money," he said, a grim smile on his face. He was clever, but not clever enough. He didn't just move it to one set of accounts. He created a daisy chain, but the final destination. It's a corporate entity in Switzerland called Sphinx Holdings. It's a shell, but it's been active. And it's linked to a series of luxury purchases, a penthouse in Monaco, a yacht currently docked in the Mediterranean. My heart hammered against my ribs. And Seraphina. "Her name is Seraphina Dubois," Marcus confirmed. a former financial analyst at Titan Global. She was quietly dismissed 6 months ago for breach of protocol. She has no digital footprint, but my guy tracked a private jet from a regional airport to Nice the day after your arrest. She's on that yacht. So that was his endgame. A new life, a new woman, and millions of dollars, all bought with my freedom. It was time for Phase 3. The trap. I devised a plan so audacious it made Marcus whistle in admiration. Using a carefully worded letter, I communicated the plan to Clara through Ben. She was to visit David, playing the distraught but loyal sister-in-law. She would tell him she had found something among my things, a key. A small, unremarkable key to a safety deposit box I had rented years ago, one David knew nothing about. She would tell him I had been acting strangely before my arrest, muttering about insurance and a failsafe. She would express her fear that it contained something that could hurt him, something I had gathered to protect myself. She would beg him to come with her to the bank to open it, to see what his unstable wife had been plotting. The beauty of the trap was its psychological perfection. David, paranoid and arrogant, would be consumed by the need to know what was in that box. He would believe I had been secretly gathering evidence against him. His ego would not allow him to ignore it. He would have to see for himself. The day of the meeting, Clara wore a wire. Marcus and 2 of his most discreet associates were positioned in and around the bank. I sat in my cell, a universe away, praying to a god I wasn't sure I believed in anymore. Clara later described the scene to me in vivid detail. David was agitated, his cool composure cracked. He met her at the bank, his eyes darting around nervously. "What did she say, Clara? What kind of insurance?" he demanded, his voice tight. "I don't know, David. She was paranoid. She said if anything ever happened to her, the truth was in the box. I'm scared." Inside the private room, with a bank manager present, the box was opened. Inside, placed there by Clara just hours before, was a single, sealed manila envelope. David's hands trembled as he ripped it open. He expected documents, bank statements, photos. Instead, he found a single, handwritten note from me. The handwriting was calm, deliberate, a stark contrast to the desperate letters I had been sending him. It read, "Hello, David. If you are reading this, it means you took the bait. You're in a bank being recorded. The failsafe is this moment. Your reaction is being watched. The real money is in Sphinx Holdings. Say hello to Seraphina for me." Clara said his face went from confusion to dawning horror to sheer, unadulterated panic. He crumpled the note, his head whipping around as if he could see the hidden cameras. "It's a setup," he snarled, his voice rising to a hysterical pitch on the recording. "She's framing me. That bitch is framing me." His own words, his frantic, guilty reaction, captured on a federal-grade audio recording, became the cornerstone of our case. The dam had finally broken. The hunter had just stumbled headfirst into the trap set by his prey. The recording was a symphony of self-incrimination. David's voice, stripped of its cultivated charm and dripping with panicked venom, was more damning than any forensic evidence. "It's a setup. She's framing me. That bitch is framing me." The raw hatred in those words, the immediate leap to his own guilt, painted a picture no jury could ignore. Marcus had the audio file cleaned and enhanced, and within 24 hours, it was in the hands of my now-energized public defender, Ben, who immediately filed a motion to dismiss all charges against me and open a new investigation into David Croft. The fallout was swift and brutal. The press, which had once feasted on my downfall, now turned its ravenous attention to David. The narrative of the grieving, betrayed husband evaporated, replaced by headlines like "The Framing Husband" and "Web of Deceit, Did CEO Set Up Wife?" The district attorney's office, facing a potential wrongful prosecution lawsuit and public humiliation, dropped the charges against me with a startling lack of ceremony. I walked out of the detention center after 3 long months, squinting in the sunlight, a free woman. Clara was there, waiting for me, her arms thrown around me in a tearful, silent embrace. The victory felt hollow, a mere ceasefire in a war that was far from over. David was still out there, and he knew I was coming for him. My freedom was conditional, a precarious ledge from which I would launch my final assault. I moved in with Clara, the modest familiarity of her apartment a stark contrast to the cold opulence of the home I had shared with David. My first call was to Marcus Thorne. "It's time for the final phase," I told him, my voice steady. "Find the money, find her. I want everything." With the official investigation now focused on David, Marcus's job became easier. The daisy chain of shell corporations unraveled, leading directly to the Swiss account of Sphinx Holdings. We discovered David had gotten sloppy, emboldened by my initial incarceration. He'd used the same corporate entity to purchase the Monaco penthouse and the yacht, the Seraphina. The paper trail was now a neon sign pointing to his guilt. But I didn't want him merely convicted. I wanted him annihilated. I wanted the poetic justice to be absolute. And for that, I needed to attack not just his freedom, but his very identity, his ego, his new life, his ill-gotten paradise. Using the small amount of money Clara could spare, and a loan from a former colleague who believed in my innocence, I funded Marcus's trip to the French Riviera. His mission: get photographic proof of David and Seraphina on the yacht, and plant a digital worm. While David was distracted by the escalating legal nightmare back in the States, Marcus, posing as a wealthy investor, chartered a boat and got within telephoto lens range of the Seraphina. The photos he sent were a punch to the gut. David, tanned and laughing, a flute of champagne in his hand, his arm draped around a stunning, dark-haired woman, Seraphina Dubois. They were the picture of carefree luxury, a vision of the life he had built on my ruin. But the masterstroke was the worm, through a contact in maritime security. Marcus managed to get a virus into the yacht's onboard Wi-Fi network during a supposed systems check by a bribed technician. The virus gave us remote access to the yacht's internal servers, including David's personal laptop. And that's when we hit the jackpot. His laptop was a treasure trove of arrogance. He had kept records, not just of the embezzlement, but of everything. There were emails between him and Seraphina planning the entire scheme, dating back over a year. They discussed me in chillingly clinical terms. The wife is the perfect cover. Her spending patterns will support the narrative. There were files detailing the creation of the fake digital trail that led to me. He had documented his own crime with the meticulous pride of an artist signing his masterpiece. We had him, we had everything. The final act of my revenge was a performance I orchestrated from Clara's living room, a symphony of public and private destruction. I first sent a single email to David's private account, the one he thought was secure. It contained just 2 attachments, the most damning photo of him and Seraphina on the yacht, and a single page from his own records detailing the plan to frame me. The subject line was, "The ghost in your machine." Within minutes, his response exploded into my inbox, a frantic, rambling, all-caps diatribe full of threats and bluster. He was unraveling in real time. He had no idea how much I had, and the uncertainty was devouring him. Then I went public. I gave an exclusive interview to a respected investigative journalist. I didn't play the weeping victim. I was calm, poised, and devastatingly precise. I laid out the entire story, presenting the evidence not as a plea for sympathy, but as a clinical exposé of a brilliant, narcissistic criminal who had made one fatal error, underestimating his wife. The story ran with the headline, "The Calculated Frame: How Isabella Croft Unraveled Her Husband's $4.3 million Lie." The day the story broke, international warrants were issued for David and Seraphina's arrest. They were apprehended by French authorities while trying to disembark the Seraphina in Monaco. The footage of him, handcuffed and being led away in his deck shoes and polo shirt, was broadcast around the world. The image of the triumphant, fleeing CEO was replaced by that of a defeated, common criminal. I sued him for divorce, of course. With the evidence of his fraud and the embezzlement, I was awarded everything that remained: the house, our frozen assets, and a significant portion of the recovered funds from the Swiss account. The gilded cage was now mine alone to own or dismantle. The final time I saw David was through a plexiglass partition in a county jail during his extradition hearing. He looked shrunken, aged a decade. The tan from the Riviera faded to a sickly yellow. He picked up the phone, his eyes burning with a mixture of hatred and a strange, grudging respect. "You destroyed me," he whispered, his voice hollow. "No, David," I corrected him, my voice calm and clear. "You were the architect of your own destruction. I just provided the blueprint. You tried to frame me for your crime, so I framed your fall for the entire world to see." I hung up the phone and walked away, leaving him to the silence of his new, very real cage. The ghost had not only escaped, she had become the warden. The quiet, supportive wife was gone forever. In her place stood Isabella Vance, reborn and unbreakable, the author of her own destiny and the architect of a justice so perfect it felt like art.